My cruel husband and mother-in-law took over my $7 million inheritance. When I confronted them, they hit me on the head with a shovel, leaving me badly injured and unconscious. They dragged me to the lake and left me to die. Luckily, I survived and struck back with a powerful revenge they never saw coming. When I look back, it's hard to believe how easily I fell for him. My name is Layla, and for a time, I thought I had the perfect life. I was 28, fresh from inheriting a $7 million fortune from my late parents. They were kind, loving, and meticulous in their planning. They left me everything, ensuring I could live comfortably and independently. At least, that's what I thought. I met Adrian at a charity event. He stood out from the crowd, tall, charming, and with this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He was in his early 30s, a successful businessman, or so he said. We started talking that night, and he told me about his entrepreneurial journey, how he'd built his company from the ground up, and how he admired strong women like me. From the start, he made me feel special. We began seeing each other regularly. He sent flowers, planned romantic dinners, and even surprised me with little notes that said things like, "You're my world." Looking back now, it feels silly how I believed every word he said. But at the time, it felt like a dream. A few months later, he introduced me to his mother, Marjorie. She was an experience. In her late 50s, she had a sharpness to her that wasn't immediately obvious. She was polite on the surface, complimenting me on my taste in fashion and my intelligence, but there was something cold behind her eyes. Adrian assured me she was just protective of him and needed time to warm up to new people. Still, I ignored the little doubts. I wanted to believe in the fairy tale. Adrian proposed on a rainy evening under a gazebo at the estate he had just acquired. It felt magical. He promised me the world, a life filled with love, trust, and partnership. I said yes without hesitation. For a while, life was perfect. We moved into a sprawling estate with a private lake. I spent my days organizing charity events and pursuing my passions, while Adrian immersed himself in his business. He was busy often, but I chalked it up to his ambition. We hosted extravagant parties, mingling with high society, and Adrian's friends all adore him. People always said we were the perfect couple. But cracks started to show. It began with small things, Adrian being secretive about phone calls, or abruptly ending conversations when I walked into the room. I dismissed it as work-related stress. Then one day, I noticed discrepancies in some financial documents. My inheritance account was being tampered with, funds transferred without my knowledge. At first, I thought it was a banking error, but as I dug deeper, I realized these were deliberate moves. The documents had Adrian's and Marjorie's names all over them. I didn't want to believe it. The man I loved, the one who promised me the world, could never betray me. But the evidence was undeniable. Adrian and Marjorie were plotting to steal my inheritance. I felt like my world was falling apart. How could I have been so blind? The confrontation was inevitable. One evening after a gala, I confronted Adrian in the study. My heart was pounding as I laid out the documents in front of him. "Explain this," I demanded, my voice trembling. Adrian's face shifted from shock to cold calculation. "Layla, you don't understand. This is all for us. For our future. Us." I snapped. "This is theft, Adrian. You and your mother have been scheming behind my back. How could you do this to me?" Before Adrian could respond, Marjorie entered the room, her expression icy. "Oh, Layla, don't be so dramatic," she said. "This is business. You wouldn't understand." I couldn't hold back my anger. "Business? This is my life. My parents' legacy. You've both betrayed me." That's when everything spiraled out of control. Marjorie grabbed a shovel lying by the fireplace, a heavy antique I had used as a decorative piece. I didn't even have time to react. She swung it at me, and the world went black. When I regained consciousness, my head throbbed, and my vision was blurry. I heard voices, Adrian and Marjorie arguing. "You should have thought this through," Marjorie hissed. "Now we have to deal with her." I felt myself being dragged. I tried to move, to scream, but my body wouldn't respond. Then I felt the cold night air and heard the lapping of water. They were taking me to the lake. I realized with horrifying clarity that they intended to stage my death as an accident. My fairy tale had turned into a nightmare, and my life was slipping away. But something inside me refused to give up. This wasn't the end. It couldn't be. As they let go of me near the water's edge, I mustered every ounce of strength I had. I would survive. I had to. And if I made it out alive, they would pay. When they dumped me by the water's edge, I could feel the chills seep through my clothes and into my skin. My head was pounding from the blow, and my body felt weak, but my mind clung to one thought. I had to survive. Adrian and Marjorie thought they'd won, thought they could erase me and take everything I had. They didn't realize how wrong they were. I kept my breathing shallow, playing unconscious as Adrian crouched down beside me. "She's not moving," he muttered. His voice was cold, detached, nothing like the man I had fallen in love with. "Let's just finish this." "You think I wanted this?" Marjorie snapped. "This is your mess, Adrian. If you hadn't been so careless." "Enough." Adrian cut her off. "We're in this together now." They were arguing over me like I wasn't even there, like I was just some object standing in their way. I waited for my chance, every nerve in my body screaming to move, to run, but I had to be smart. If I acted too soon, they'd catch me. Adrian grabbed my arms and began dragging me closer to the lake. I felt the cool water touch my legs, and panic surged through me. They were going to drown me, make it look like I slipped and hit my head. The perfect accident. But they underestimated me. When Adrian's grip loosened for just a moment, I made my move. With all the strength I could muster, I jerked my body to the side, breaking free of his hold. I didn't stop to think or look back. I bolted. My legs were shaky, my head spinning, but adrenaline pushed me forward. "Layla!" Adrian shouted. I heard them scrambling behind me, their footsteps splashing through the mud. But I had one advantage. I knew the estate better than they did. This was my home, not theirs. I veered off into the woods, the darkness swallowing me as I ran. Branches scratched at my skin and my lungs burned, but I didn't stop. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away. When I finally couldn't run anymore, I collapsed behind a cluster of thick bushes, gasping for air. I stayed as still as possible, listening for their voices. They were close, but not close enough to find me. "We'll get her," Marjorie hissed. "She can't have gone far." Adrian sounded frustrated. "We need to finish this tonight. If she talks." "She won't," Marjorie cut him off. "We'll find her." Their voices faded as they moved further away. I waited until I was sure they were gone before I dared to move. My entire body ached, and my head throbbed from the injury, but I couldn't afford to stop. I needed help and I needed a plan. I made my way to the edge of the property, keeping to the shadows. There was a small service gate that led to the main road. I prayed it was still unlocked. When I reached it, relief washed over me. It was open. I slipped through and started walking, every step agony, but I didn't care. I was alive. Eventually, I reached a small diner on the outskirts of town. The place was nearly empty, and the waitress behind the counter looked up in shock when she saw me. "Are you okay?" she asked, rushing over. "I need help," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please, don't call anyone yet. Just let me rest for a moment." She nodded, guiding me to a booth and bringing me a glass of water. I sat there, trembling, trying to gather my thoughts. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. Adrian and Marjorie were influential, and they'd already proven they were capable of anything. I needed to be smart about this. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to fight back. Adrian and Marjorie had tried to take everything from me, my money, my life, my dignity. But they hadn't taken my will. I would make them pay. I stayed hidden for days, moving from one small motel to another. I used cash to avoid leaving a trail and spent every waking moment planning my next move. I knew Adrian's business dealings were shady. I had seen glimpses of it before. If I could prove it, I could ruin him. And Marjorie, well, people like her always had skeletons in their closets. I just had to find them. First, I needed resources. I contacted a trusted lawyer, one of the few people I knew I could rely on. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to get his help securing what was left of my inheritance. He assured me he'd keep things discreet. Next, I started digging into Adrian's finances. He thought he was clever, hiding his schemes behind layers of fake companies and offshore accounts. But he wasn't as smart as he thought. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered fraudulent investments, embezzlement, and connections to criminal enterprises. Adrian had built his empire on lies. Marjorie was no better. It didn't take long to find evidence of decades of tax evasion. She'd been siphoning money through bogus charities and laundering it through Adrian's companies. Together, they were a perfect storm of greed and corruption. As I pieced everything together, I felt a spark of hope. They thought they'd destroyed me, but they didn't realize they'd only made me stronger. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to dismantle everything they'd built, piece by piece. I wasn't ready to strike just yet, but I knew my time was coming. And when it did, Adrian and Marjorie wouldn't know what hit them. For weeks, I stayed hidden, working tirelessly to uncover every secret Adrian and Marjorie had buried. My world had been shattered, but my resolve grew stronger with each passing day. I wasn't just planning my survival anymore, I was orchestrating their downfall. During those quiet days, holed up in small motels or rented apartments under false names, I had time to reflect. I realized how much I had ignored the warning signs about Adrian. His too-perfect charm, the way he always seemed to deflect questions about his past, his business, or even his family. And Marjorie, she had always been a shadow looming over our relationship, subtly belittling me, questioning my choices, and driving a wedge between us. I saw it all now. Their plan to worm their way into my life and steal everything I had. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't the naive girl they thought I was. I had grown up watching my parents manage their fortune, learning from them about finances, integrity, and strength. Now, those lessons became my weapon. I started with Adrian's business. My lawyer, Martin, had quietly secured what remained of my inheritance and helped me access records that Adrian had foolishly thought were untouchable. As I sifted through the paperwork, it became clear that Adrian wasn't just greedy. He was reckless. Fake companies, embezzled funds, and illegal partnerships. Everywhere I turned, there was evidence of his crimes. And the best part? He had been so arrogant that he left a trail of documents tying everything back to him. Marjorie, on the other hand, was more meticulous, but not enough to escape my scrutiny. She had been evading taxes for decades, funneling money into sham charities and offshore accounts. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I felt. These were people who had no moral compass, no boundaries, no shame. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed a way to deliver the final blow. That's when I started planning my return. Adrian and Marjorie had always thrived in high society, using their charm and influence to mask their crimes. They loved being seen at glamorous events, rubbing shoulders with the elite. So, I decided I would confront them on their own turf. There was a grand charity gala coming up, one that Adrian and Marjorie were sure to attend. It was perfect, a stage big enough to ensure their humiliation. The weeks leading up to the gala were tense. I stayed in constant contact with Martin, who helped me compile the evidence into an airtight case. We had everything: bank records, emails, forged signatures, and even witness testimonies from people Adrian had scammed in his fraudulent deals. I also worked with a private investigator to verify Marjorie's tax evasion schemes, ensuring that nothing could be disputed. But even as I prepared, I couldn't shake the fear that they might somehow get away with it. Adrian and Marjorie were cunning and ruthless. I had no doubt they would try to retaliate if they suspected what I was up to. So, I stayed one step ahead, making sure to keep my movements secret and my plans quiet. Finally, the night of the gala arrived. I could feel the weight of everything I had been through pressing down on me as I prepared. My heart raced as I slipped into the elegant gown I had chosen for the occasion. It wasn't just about looking the part. It was about showing Adrian and Marjorie that I wasn't the broken woman they thought they had destroyed. As I entered the grand ballroom, the air buzzed with chatter and laughter. Glittering chandeliers hung overhead, and the scent of expensive perfume filled the room. It was the perfect facade of wealth and power, the kind of place Adrian and Marjorie thrived in. I spotted them almost immediately, surrounded by a crowd of admirers, laughing and sipping champagne like they didn't have a care in the world. I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my composure. Tonight wasn't about rage. It was about justice. I made my way through the crowd, greeting people I hadn't seen in months. Some were surprised to see me, their eyes widening as they took in my calm demeanor. I could hear whispers, but I ignored them. All that mattered was the moment I had been waiting for. When the time was right, I stepped onto the small stage at the center of the room. The crowd quieted, their attention shifting to me. Adrian and Marjorie froze, their smiles faltering as they saw me standing there. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice steady. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have something important to share." I looked directly at Adrian and Marjorie, savoring the panic that flashed across their faces. This was it, the moment their empire of lies would come crashing down. What I revealed that night would change everything. But even then, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of their reckoning. Standing on that stage, I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, their anticipation hanging in the air. My heart raced, but I kept my expression calm. I was no longer the naive woman who had blindly trusted Adrian and Marjorie. I was stronger now, and tonight, I was taking back my life. "Many of you know Adrian and Marjorie," I began, my voice clear and unwavering. "They've been pillars of this community, celebrated for their generosity and charm. But appearances can be deceiving." I glanced at them in the crowd. Adrian's jaw was tight, his knuckles white around his champagne glass. Marjorie, always the more calculating of the two, tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "You see, I recently discovered that my husband, Adrian, and his mother, Marjorie, have not been the people they claimed to be. For months, they've been plotting to steal my inheritance, forging documents and moving funds without my knowledge. But that's just the beginning." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, and I pressed on, pulling out the meticulously compiled evidence I had brought with me. I handed the documents to a few prominent figures in the room, ensuring they would reach everyone. "We're holding as proof of Adrian's fraudulent business dealings. Fake companies, embezzled funds, illegal investments, it's all there. He's built his empire on lies and deceit." I turned my attention to Marjorie. And Marjorie? She's no innocent bystander. For decades, she's been evading taxes, funneling money through sham charities and laundering it through Adrian's businesses. Together, they've cheated not just me, but countless others. The room fell silent, the air thick with shock. Adrian finally broke, his voice sharp and defensive. "This is absurd. She's lying to ruin me." I met his glare, unflinching. "Lying? Then perhaps you'd like to explain these?" I gestured to the screen behind me, where incriminating emails, financial statements, and signed documents appeared, all tying him and Marjorie to their crimes. Marjorie stepped forward, her voice cold and calculated. "This is a personal vendetta, nothing more. She's bitter and trying to tarnish our name." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the room. "Bitter? Yes, Marjorie, I am bitter. Bitter because you and your son tried to kill me." Gasps filled the room as I recounted the night they attacked me, how Adrian dragged me to the lake, intending to make my death look like an accident. "But I survived," I said, my voice steady. "And I've spent every moment since gathering the truth. I won't be silenced." As I finished, the sound of approaching footsteps filled the hall. Law enforcement officers entered the room, heading straight for Adrian and Marjorie. The evidence I had provided earlier had been enough to secure their arrests. Adrian's face twisted in anger as he shouted protests, while Marjorie's icy facade finally cracked, revealing the fear beneath. I stepped off the stage as they were handcuffed, watching as the people they had once charmed turned away in disgust. They had spent years cultivating their image, but in a matter of moments, it had all crumbled. As Adrian was led past me, he hissed, "You think you've won, Layla? This isn't over." I looked him in the eye, unshaken. Oh, it's over, Adrian. For both of you, the rest of the night was a blur. Friends and acquaintances came to offer their support, their disbelief evident in their words. I stayed composed, but inside, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. It was finally over. In the weeks that followed, Adrian and Marjorie faced the full force of the law. Their assets were seized, their reputations destroyed, and their once powerful presence in society reduced to nothing. They were left penniless and disgraced, just as they had intended for me. As for me, I reclaimed my life. My inheritance, my dignity, and my peace of mind were mine once more. But more importantly, I had proven to myself that I was stronger than I ever thought possible. Looking back, I realized that their betrayal, as painful as it was, taught me something invaluable. It showed me the strength of resilience, the importance of fighting for justice, and the power of not giving up. Adrian and Marjorie may have been consumed by their greed, but they could never destroy my spirit. Now, as I stand on the other side of it all, I know one thing for certain. I survived, I fought back, and I won. This is my story, and it doesn't end with betrayal. It ends with triumph.